Everybody, and welcome to a Deck Tech on the Constructor Criticism YouTube channel. I'm Spencer. I'm the host of Constructor Criticism and the producer of everything here on the network. I'm excited today to talk to you about the deck that's doing so well and Standard took 6 of the top 8 spots at the PTQ Online this weekend, and that's Golgari Midrange. This deck is doing a ton of things right now and is really beloved by a lot of Magic players, getting to play these style of mid-range decks again after, being forced to play against those Goblin Chainwhirler decks for the last year. A lot of people really miss this style of deck and are pretty excited to have it back, and for good reason. These decks are really fun, and I'm excited today to talk to you about some of the things that some of them are doing. There's a lot of variation of these lists. The list that we're going to be looking at today is by Phelan. Took this to an 8-1 finish at the Standard PTQ in the Swiss round. We're going to go over their deck list and talk about the things that are going on. So let's kind of start with the creature base. We have 4 Llanowar Elves, 4 Merfolk Branchwalker, 1 District Guide, 4 Jadelight Ranger, 2 Plaguecrafters, 3 Golgari Findbrokers, and 3 Ravenous Chupacabra. One of the really interesting things about this deck that is getting more and more adoption right now is the District Guides. This is because the mana in this deck is honestly not that great. You have 4 swamps, 4 forests, or 4 swamps, 4 overgrown tombs, and then 8 of each basic land. That's just a lot of basic lands in a deck, and the deck is kind of really mana intensive. So because of that, you'll see 1 or 2 district guides in quite a few decks. One of the other things that you'll see is Llanowar Elves. 4 Llanowar Elves in this deck is because, honestly, there's just not very many good 2-drops in the standard format. In fact, I would argue that there's probably no actual good 2-drops in green and black. Whether it's Thorn Element, Thorn Lieutenant, or different things that you can be doing, they're kind of mediocre, and even Merfolk Branchwalker is not that good of a magic card, so Llanowar Elves kind of lets you skip that. It says, what I actually want to be doing is casting things like Plaguecrafter, and maybe casting other things a little bit earlier on the curve. Playing an extra District Guide is another way to get the most out of your Llanowar Elves. And just not being forced into playing a bunch of mediocre cards like Wildgrowth Walker and things like that could be something that you could try and do. That being said, there were success with Wildgrowth Walker lists at the PTQ this weekend, so tons of things going on for that. Next up, kind of the interesting card here, there's 3 Ravenous Chupacabras in the main deck, and there's absolutely no, in this list, Vraska's Contempt in the main. I think this is because between Plaguecrafter and Eldest Reborn, which we'll get to in a minute, I think you have a lot of things that if you can keep the board clear, you can deal with their Planeswalkers in different ways, and Ravenous Chupacabra is a way for you to do that. There's also other things in this deck that kind of take care of those things, and the exile becomes less important. Golgari Findbroker is green, black, 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. This can be any permanent. This can be Planeswalkers, this can be lands, this can be an Eldest Reborn, and Golgari Findbroker just gets a lot of value just from a okay body. 3/4/4/4 is nothing to be upset about. But the value it gets in providing these kind of grindy decks, card advantage is really high, so Golgari Findbroker gets a little bit better. The Planeswalkers that we have is 3 Golgari Queens, 2 Vivien Reids, and 2 Vraska Relic Seeker. Vivien Reid is a really powerful Planeswalker in the fact that it deals with a lot of pragmatic permanents that you might not want around. Different enchantments, creatures with flying or something that your deck's going to have some trouble with, and Vivien Reid takes care of those type of cards really easily while providing a ton of card advantage and card selection through her plus ability. Vraska Relic Seeker is honestly how I've lost to this deck most of the time. I'm just not really able to put pressure on Vraskas due to the amount of removal, and between Plaguecrafter and Ravenous Chupacabra and Eldest Reborn, it's really hard to actually stay on board long enough to pressure a Vraska before she gets to 10 loyalty, and because of that, I've ended up losing to this Vraska quite a bit. The spells that we have are 2 Assassin's Trophy, 2 Cast Down, and 2 Eldest Reborn. The Eldest Reborn I'm counting as spells instead of enchantments, but it's because they're all doing spell-like things. Eldest Reborn has been one of the best cards for me in Standard. We actually have a thread this week going on in our Constructor Criticism family about how good Eldest Reborn is. It seems that a lot of people are not having the same type of rebuilds that I'm having with it, because to me, it's been the best card in my Jeskai deck by a pretty substantial margin, and I have been really impressed out of these green-black decks too. But this is a card that the format could honestly get away from. Eldest Reborn is really powerful because people aren't prepared for it, or people aren't acting around it or playing around it, and because of that, it gains a lot of power. And also, the graveyards are kind of just full of good, meaty stuff for Eldest Reborn to get back on its final ability. So for me, this card's been a really great inclusion and something that I would continue playing in this deck. The cast downs in the Assassin's Trophy is really important because you're playing 6 2-mana removal spells, really not allowing you to get tempoed out of the game. This is really important because let's be honest, the way that you want to play mid-range decks is have these efficient answers. And Assassin's Trophy is one of the most efficient answers we've seen in a long time. Being able to just kill anything that gets in your way for 2 mana is really good. Even if they get another mana, you know, it doesn't add up to being worth all that much at the end of the day. Games are going to go long no matter what, so that extra mana doesn't matter quite as much as you would think it would, unless you're mana screwed yourself. So overall, Assassin's Trophy cast down as a 4-2 split makes a lot of sense for this deck because it lets you use your mana efficiently every single turn of the game because your answers are so cheap. We already talked a little bit about the lands. We have 8 Forest, 8 Swamp, 4 Overgrown Tomb, and 4 Woodland Cemetery. This is just a 24 land deck with a bunch of Merfolk Branchwalkers, Jadelight Rangers, and Llanowar Elves to make sure that we're hitting our lands all the time. Between that and District Guide, this deck is going to get to its 6 mana to cast its Relic Seeker. It's going to get to the 5 mana to cast Eldest Reborn, and it's going to make use of its extra lands through that Vraska Golgari Queen. This deck has a really good way of just grinding out advantages through all of its different means, and even getting flooded out is okay with this deck because of all those things that we just talked about. I'm pretty happy playing this deck in the main deck the way it is. If I was going to play a League tomorrow, I would just straight up copy this main deck. The sideboard that this player played had 1 Deadweight, 3 Duress, 2 Arguel's Bloodfast, 1 Kraul Harpooner, 1 Wildgrowth Walker, 1 Deathgorge Scavenger, 1 Plague Mare, 2 Ritual of Soot, 1 Vraska's Contempt, and 2 Carnage Tyrant. This person clearly knows that they want a little bit of extra speed against the red decks, playing that Deadweight, and even playing those Ritual of Soots, trying to make sure that they're the control deck. A couple of the weird one-ofs that I want to talk about are the Kraul Harpooner, the Wildgrowth Walker, and the Deathgorge Scavenger. I'm not entirely sure where each of these is going to serve its best, but the player clearly wanted a diverse number of cheap creatures to board into, including things like Plague Mare. Carnage Tyrant, Arguel's Bloodfast, Duress, we all know where those come in. They're going to be really powerful in the times you need it, and the extras of Vraska's Contempt for an instant speed way to deal with something like the Fairy is probably really important in the 75, especially since it's targeted. Outside of that, the sideboard is pretty simple other than those one-ofs, and understanding whether that person wants those one-ofs in different matchups and why. Kraul Harpooner could be a really great thing to just play as an extra 2-mana thing that kills something, especially if you're playing against a bunch of 1/1s. Ritual of Soot can come in against those token decks, and, you know, Carnage Tyrant and Duress do their job. So, overall, I'm really happy with this specific 75 looking at the top 8, and it's something that I'm going to be trying here in the next couple days. Thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to hit those sub and those like buttons. You know, everything that you do to interact with the channel is really helpful for me and for the other people that produce content here. So thank you so much. Don't forget to ring the bell, and don't forget to check out patreon.com/ccmtg to support the Constructive Criticism show specifically. Thank you everybody so much, and we'll see you guys all next week with another deck tech.